We are coming out of closed session, but we have nothing to report. So starting with the open session, and the next item is item number 5, Town Manager Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. It is my pleasure to introduce Roberta Feliciano as the town's new Planning and Building Director. I have a few things to say for Roberta here before, yes. So Roberta is very experienced in city planning with comprehensive experience in both current and advanced planning. She received a bachelor's degree in economics from UCLA and a Master of Architecture from UC Berkeley. So we have a very intellectual new employee. Roberta has over 11 years of experience with reviewing development applications, my favorite, writing staff reports, making presentations, providing zoning administration, and assisting the public. She came to Ross from the city of Richmond, where she served as a highly regarded senior planner. In her personal time, Roberta serves on the San Pablo Planning Commission and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's Path to Clean Air Steering Committee. She lives in the East Bay with her husband and enjoys painting, walks, and bike rides in nature. She started work in Ross on October 17th and has been doing a great job getting up to speed and learning the community. Welcome, Roberta. She might have a few things to say.
Thank you, Krista, for that introduction. And good evening, Mayor Breckus and council members. I'm really excited to be here and look forward to working with you all and hopefully making impactful contributions to the town of Ross. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome. Next item is the mayor's report. Did you know there is a jail located below the town hall? I've been on the council for 11 years, and I didn't know there was a jail at town hall until a few months ago when someone mentioned that town staff was cleaning out old boxes in the jail. Immediately, I requested to see the historical Ross jail. A few weeks ago, I needed to tour other town facilities as we continue to discuss upgrading the Civic Center buildings, and it had been a number of years since I last entered some of them. I took a tour of part of the fire facilities, which have been shut down because they are not habitable. The portion of the firehouse that has been shut down is in terrible shape. Mayor Pro Tem Brill Kirchner and Chief Pata and Town Manager Johnson did the tour with me. For any of you who think the facilities do not need to be replaced or who hold to the view that they can be repaired, I can assure you that is incorrect. The fire, and for that matter, the police facilities, are in dire need of repair, and the closed down portion of the fire facility smells dank and is not safe. Under any definition of habitability, the closed down portion of the firehouse is not habitable. After we finished the tour of the firehouse, we went over to the town hall to surprise town manager Krista Johnson for her birthday, which council members Julie McMillan and Elizabeth Robbins kindly organized. After coffee and cupcakes, we all agreed to tour the jail together. In the morning after, you'll see a photo of the council with Chief Pata and Krista Johnson in the jail. Councilmember Beach Cool wanted the photo to be titled "In Jail Where They Belong," but I did not think that was very funny or appropriate. If the size of the jail is any indication, we had very few criminal offenders in Ross because the jail is quite small. Being in the jail made me feel a little anxious. If the door shut on you, I'm not sure anyone could hear you in there. Also, the Wi-Fi did not work. I think that when we do rebuild the Civic Center facilities, we must keep the town jail. Like the walk-in safe that exists in the town clerk's office, the town jail is part of our past and we should maintain it for the future. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Next item is 7 council committee liaison reports. Does anybody have a report?
I wanted you all to know that the Barber Winship Firewise Neighborhood Group had a walkthrough with Battalion Chief Todd Lando from Central Marin Fire on Saturday. And he took a very close look at someone's house and explained to us that Zone 0, which requires absolutely no organic vegetation within 5 feet of any structure, will probably become the law for existing houses on January 1st, 2026, which means a ton of changes to everyone's home. He also helped us look at a lot of chimneys or canyons that go up in Winship and Baywood and Wellington, and also in Lincoln Park. And he is going to be working to develop some proposals that will hopefully get into the MWPA work plan that can use some of San Anselmo and Town of Ross local money to help us address those vegetation chimneys. So more to come on that. But he was so kind to come and spend his morning with us. So thank you to Todd Lando.
Is there anybody else? Okay. Next is staff and community reports. Town Manager Johnson, do you have a report?
I do, just a few things. A couple updates for the council this evening. There was a huge number of kids and families trick-or-treating along Shady Lane last week on Halloween. One resident reported 1,500 trick-or-treaters to his house. Big thanks to Ross Police Department for closing down the street, keeping the walkers safe, and staffing a booth that gave away water, glow sticks, and treats to the trick-or-treaters. Next up, Ross Recreation has expanded their programming to include non-school day camps to better support Ross families. So staff will be running a Veterans Day camp tomorrow. Families can choose between a half day or a full day option. Right now, we have 15 students that are enrolled for tomorrow's day camp. Age Friendly Ross is hosting a winter breakfast gathering on Monday, December 4th from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at Magic. Michael Bogart, garden manager for Magic, will speak about winter gardening. A light breakfast will be provided. Please RSVP by November 27th to Ross Recreation Manager Maureen Borthwick at agefriendly@townofross.org. Town offices will be closed tomorrow for Veterans Day and on November 23rd and 24th for Thanksgiving holidays. Public Works staff continue their work to get the town ready for winter rains by cleaning out storm drains and completing the El Camino Bueno drainage project that's scheduled to be completed this week. Rain is forecast for Tuesday through Thursday of this coming week. Hope everybody is prepared. I'm looking forward to the turkey trot that the Ross Auxiliary is holding in Ross this coming Sunday. It starts at 8:30 a.m. in front of the post office. I'll be one of the many in turkey tutus and running shoes. I'm going to hand it over to our Public Works Director, Rich Simonich, now so that he can provide a brief status update regarding the County Flood Control District's removal of the Corte Madera Creek fish ladder and the local hazard mitigation plan. Take it away, Rich. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Town Manager, Mayor Breckus and Council. Just a quick update on the Corte Madera Creek Flood Risk Management Project. That's the county project that proposes to remove the fish ladder and do some improvements to the natural channel between the fish ladder and Lagunitas Bridge. And then there's also work down at College of Marin and in that area and in Granton Park. So we were hoping to have this fish ladder removed, I believe, this year, according to what they were telling us during the EIR review and that sort of thing. So they've run into just a couple things that have delayed the project. They're working on some more grant funding. They have a $2 million shortfall from the $16 million project budget. They've completed a few elements already. They've done the access road into the channel. That's just down in Kentfield. And they've started work on the pump station there at Granton Park in Kentfield as well. But they are seeking a new grant to cover the $2 million shortfall with the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And I've been working with the county. We've had some calls with Cal OES. They're interested in what the floodplain managers think about the project. And so I've had some conversations with them. I've got another meeting with the county and Cal OES next week. They're interested on what the floodplain administrator, myself for the town of Ross, and the floodplain administrators for Larkspur and the county, how they feel about the project. And overall, I think we're in support of the project. We still need to have some analysis of the modeling results to make sure there's no impacts to our town properties. And they also need to, there is a rise, the project does cause a rise in the concrete channel, so they're gonna be pursuing that same Clomer-Lomer process that they will be doing for the SAFER project. Whether they're gonna ditch the Clomer and go straight to the Lomer is still up in the air. But we think, according to the county's last report from May, they believe construction will be in 2024, 2025. So we'll look forward to seeing that. And if anything of importance comes up, we'll also report that to you as it happens. Quick now update on the 5-year update of the multi-county, multi-jurisdictional local hazard mitigation plan. You may recall we adopted in 2018 this same plan, and I've been working with the rest of the steering committee group. I'm on the steering committee for the town of Ross to develop and refine the local hazard mitigation plan. So they've added a few elements that were not on the 2018 plan. We're looking more closely at dam failure, which impacts Ross with the, or concerns Ross with the Phoenix Lake Dam. We're looking at impacts due to drought, extreme weather, extreme heat, severe weather, wind, hail, and that sort of thing. And also we're looking at subsidence and landslides, and they've also added volcanoes, but I don't think there's any of those around us. So look to see the draft of that plan early next year for review. I'll bring that to council for review and adoption. And then as all the agencies adopt that, then it goes to FEMA for adoption, and then we're okay for another 5 years. So the local hazard mitigation plan allows us to apply for FEMA for emergency grant funding and that sort of thing. If we don't have this in place, we're not eligible for any emergency funding. So it's an important document. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, back to you, Krista.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, so next up is a report from the Ross Property Owners Association. Is somebody here from the Ross Property Owners Association to give that report? Or online?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Next up is the consent agenda. We have items A through E listed on our consent, and if we do not hear from somebody, well, first off, does any member of the council want to take an item off? And does any member of the public wish to be heard on an item on our consent agenda? Anybody online? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Mayor Breckus?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
All right, with the vote of 5, the motion passes.
Moving on to item number 11. This is recommendation to introduce ordinance number 725 to amend the Ross Municipal Code, Chapter 10.28. And I believe, Rich, you also have that report? Yes, I do. Give me a second to bring it up here.
Okay, so tonight we're introducing ordinance number 725, amending the Ross Municipal Code, Chapter 1028, known as the Parking Code. And tonight's amendment is all related to the changes in the alignment of the Laurel Grove Safe Pathways Phase 2 project. We completed Phase 2A just this summer. Phase 2B will be, we're looking to going out to bid in the spring of 2024. That'll bring the pathway around the corner up past Canyon. So this ordinance will cover all of the impacts to the existing parking and revisions to that for both Phase 2A and 2B. So just really briefly, so this slide kind of shows the current parking restrictions on Laurel Grove. Let's see, look at there we go. So no parking coming up from Sir Francis Drake Boulevard up Laurel Grove, just past Magic. There's currently no parking here up to the driveway into Magic. On the opposite side, no parking between Sir Francis Drake and Walters. And so this is currently. So we allow parking along the curb and in the dirt. This is before the project. It was kind of haphazard parking along Magic frontage, kind of catch as catch can if there was a boulder in the way or whatever. And then we actually restrict parking from that the entrance to Magic where you go to the barn where the Ross players play, and that's that last access bridge. From there, all the way down Laurel Grove, past Canyon, that's all restricted parking. And then on the opposite side, for some reason, we restricted parking here. This doesn't work very well here. Let me use this thing. So we restricted parking here on the opposite side, the northeast side, between Canyon for just 150 feet. But there's no parking. It's impossible to park up until you get to this open area by Juana Allegra because of it's kind of the pinch point where the slope of 77 Laurel Grove kind of comes into the roadway. So there's really very little parking existing along here anyway. So the new ordinance on this next slide kind of shows where in blue where the new no parking area is going to be. So nothing changes here on the north side between Sir Francis Drake and Walters. We've lost about 10 spaces along the Magic frontage. We've had these new parking bulb outs here and here, which provided some parking. And then we restrict the parking where the pathway is. There's no parking, of course, where that concrete berm and the pathway is, all the way down to where we did create new parking spaces here, where it was no parking before. So we now put in about 6 front-end parking spaces in this dirt lot. And we're going to do a little bit more improvements on this to build it up with rock and that sort of thing, and make it more usable through the winter months. And then we continue to have no parking all the way down here past Canyon with the new ordinance. We've also, on the northeast side, we're going to extend the no parking all the way between Canyon and the Mauna Allegra driveway. With the new improvements, and I don't know if some of you may have noticed that Comcast has put in this big battery backup system right here on the corner, which kind of took up what little parking there was there. The parking that was available here really didn't serve anybody except people, maybe construction trucks that are having lunch there or something like that. The closest lot is 77 Laurel Grove, where that parking would be of any residential benefit, and they're totally in support of removing all parking availability along the stretch. So they're okay with it, and it's restricted anyway it'll be restricted by the new project anyway. So that kind of summarizes what the new parking ordinance, how things are going to change. So the net loss of spaces in between Sir Francis Drake and Canyon, we lost 6 spaces, mainly along the Magic frontage in the dirt area where people would park. We did coordinate with Marin Art and Garden Center administration folks during the design process and the public outreach, And they're happy with the situation here with the availability of parking. And then, they have plenty of parking on site as well. We had some issues with people on their, during the Magic's Thursday events. They'd park up on Walters, which is definitely restricted parking, but that's since kind of resolved itself with the help of the police department and my own Public Works notifications and cleaning up the signs, making things more visible. So that concludes my presentation. So staff recommends that the town council introduce ordinance number 725 to amend the Ross Municipal Code, Chapter 10.28, the stopping, standing, loading, and parking ordinance, and schedule consideration of adoption of the ordinance for December 14th, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any question for staff? Should we open it up for public? Is there anybody that wishes to be heard on this item? Anyone on Zoom?
There are no raised hands at this time.
Seeing none, is there a need for discussion, or do we have a motion?
But I move to, what are we introducing? Ordinance 725, amending Ross Municipal Code, Chapter 10.28.
Second.
Councilmember McMillan,
Aye.
Councilmember Robbins,
Aye.
Mayor Breckus,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kircher,
Aye.
Councilmember Cool.
Aye.
All right, with a vote of 5, the motion passes.
Moving on to item number 12, Mayor Breckus and Councilmember Robbins recommend that the town council engage in a general discussion regarding the planned closure of the Ross Fire Station 18 in July 2025 and the status of the provision of emergency medical services in Ross.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a real brief introduction, and then I'll hand it over to Mayor Breckus and Councilmember Robbins. So this item was placed on the agenda at the request of Mayor Breckus and Councilmember Robbins. Their memorandum to the town council is attached to the staff report as attachment 1 in your agenda packet. I prepared a very brief cover memo, a staff report. The staff report provides a brief background regarding the Ross Fire Station, Ross's membership in Ross Valley Fire Department starting in 2012, and several attachments which provide information the council received 2020 and 2021 that led to the council's unanimous vote to close the Ross Fire Station effective July 2025. One of the attachments is a standards of coverage study that was commissioned by Ross Valley Fire Department and the town of Ross in 2019. Another attachment provided is the executed 2022 Ross Valley Fire Department amended JPA agreement that outlined a plan for closing Ross's Fire Station 18 on July 1st, 2025, and stating the details regarding ongoing staffing levels and related issues. The second section of the staff report provides information regarding the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority's paramedic ambulance facility that is located in the Ross Fire Station, and for which the town plans to build a new facility as part of its Civic Center project in the near future. Both Ross Valley Fire Department Interim Chief Mahoney is here, and our Ross Valley Paramedic Authority Executive Officer Chief Weber. They're both here to answer questions that the council may have. I'll turn it over to Mayor Breckus and Councilmember Robbins as this item was placed on the agenda by them. Okay, thank you.
So I can speak to this. So as you know, about 3 years ago, there were discussions about whether Ross should close its fire station. It was in the context of wanting to rebuild the buildings in the Civic Center, fire, police, paramedic, and town offices. And the cost of all of that was estimated to be about $28 million. There was a discussion about, do we really need all of those buildings? And one topic that came up was, well, perhaps Ross doesn't need a fire engine. It was pointed out that there have been almost no fires in Ross in the past few years. And the town manager suggested that we could relocate our fire services to a neighboring station, which seemed reasonable since the fires are quite rare in Ross. I think one thing that people didn't realize was that fire services have changed dramatically over the last few decades, and that all firemen are EMTs, so they are our emergency medical responders, and some firefighters are also paramedics, so they're especially skilled emergency medical providers. And so closing the fire station and having fire services provided from the next town over also meant having emergency medical response provided from the next town over. Ross, however, also has had for the last 40 years the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority ambulance stationed in Ross, and the ambulance is staffed by paramedics. And so during these discussions, it was explained that if the fire station closed, the paramedics could stay, and they're available about 85% of the time, so that responses for fire and especially emergency medical calls, which is the bulk of the calls that go to 911, that the response time would be pretty much unchanged because the paramedics would be here and they would be available 85% of the time. That seemed reasonable. And this is a topic now that we're talking about again, simply because though the understanding 3 years ago was that the paramedics would stay in Ross and that it was Ross's decision whether they stay. In fact, we have only a 4-year lease with the paramedic authority, and we would like them to stay forever. Or in any case, what we would like is to have emergency medical responders in Ross forever. And so it turns out that an unexpected consequence of closing the fire station is that unless we take action with either a paramedic lease or keeping the fire station open, then Ross would be left with no emergency medical responders based in town at all. And based on the 2019 Citygate study, that would mean that response times in Ross are at a minimum 2 minutes more, and that would put the town of Ross in the category of an emergency, as in an emerging rural community. And so, and when Ross residents were polled about what do they value, what do they want in terms of town services, the number one service was emergency medical services. And so seeing that this fire station is scheduled to close and that the firefighters have provided medical services for years, and seeing that we don't at the moment have a long-term paramedic lease, a long-term lease with the paramedic authority to keep an ambulance in Ross, we wanted to discuss which of those avenues would be the best way to ensure that the town of Ross continues to have emergency medical workers in town. That's really the outline of what the topic is. The town's goal, or the town wants to provide an adequate response time for emergency medical services, and whether that means working with the paramedic authority to have a longer lease, or whether that means reconsidering the decision to close the fire station and keeping the fire station open. Either of those would provide emergency and medical workers in Ross and would be ideal.
Yeah, to follow up on that, we already made the decision to rebuild the paramedic station, and that decision was made with all of the council, I think, believing that the paramedics would remain in Ross. So obviously, you don't build a nearly $2 million station and then have a 4-year contract. So when we tried to address that and get a lease extension, we initially understood maybe that's problematic because of the paramedic tax not passing. We proposed that we give an out if the paramedic tax ever doesn't pass, and then we got told that there are other obstacles that might be considered, including relocating the station to Corte Madera or and bookending service. And so that caused us enough to be concerned that we felt like, as a community, we made the decision to close our station, understanding that the Ross paramedics would stay in Ross. And to your point about the community value, I mean, I don't think anybody thought that fire isn't important and valuable, but there was a survey that was given to the community and it asked, what is, on this topic, what are your biggest concerns when you think about closing the fire station? And one of the concerns and important points was, want to make sure we have emergency medical response here. And so the paramedics leaving Ross is a huge problem and certainly a game changer in terms of what we understood was happening when we made that decision. We don't feel like it's right for some council members to now understand that issue and not bring it back to the community and the council and have a discussion about what that means and what we should be doing. And I think I think you put it very well, that a medical response from the fire department is a really important medical response. And if we don't have the guarantee that the paramedics are remaining, reopening our fire station is a really important consideration that we should at least discuss and the community should hear about at this time. So I think that's do you have anything else to add?
Just if there are questions or comments from council members or members of the public.
I have a question. I understand that the term of the lease is 4 years because that is the term of the parcel tax. So I think there's flexibility down the road to lengthen the term of the parcel tax to 8 years or 10 years or whatever the longest time could be. But I guess my real question, that wasn't even a question. My question is it a possibility that the paramedics are intending to leave the town of Ross, especially in light of the fact that if they were to leave, we would be the only jurisdiction without any fire or paramedics. So it seems like that's kind of a funny thing to do, maybe a breach of the fiduciary duty even. And also, would the paramedics want to leave the town of Ross knowing that we were building a $2 million facility, state-of-the-art facility? I guess I'd like to hear from you, Chief Weber, about what your thoughts are going down the road.
All right, thank you, Director, Councilmember McMillan today. Jason Weber, Ross Valley Paramedic Authority Executive Officer. I think Dr. Robbins summed up the history of how we got here, and I don't believe anything's changed. I want to clarify that no one is proposing moving the ambulance from the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority, or I believe the Ross Valley Fire Department, and really nothing has changed since those discussions. The 2-minute response time is an increase, and that's making the assumption that you're receiving an engine company from the San Anselmo station, and in light of if they were committed on a call, then you'd probably get Station 17, which is Kentfield right down the road. Now, the data did suggest that 85% of the time the ambulance would be available in town or available for response. And that leaves about 15% of the time that there would be neither an ambulance or an engine with that additional 2-minute response. And I did check with the chief, and the police do respond to some of the medicals depending on what other activities or where their location is, and they have automatic external defibrillators as well. Part of the proposal also was to make sure that all of the engines in Ross Valley Fire were ALS or had advanced life support, so had a paramedic available to them. And when we look at paramedic services, especially with the more acute calls, cardiac arrest, a CHF patient that's having really significant breathing issues, that definitive care arriving is that advanced life support, right? So treating them in an ALS way, and that clock stops with that arrival of the first due ALS engine company. On those more serious calls, we also send a second engine company. Just as you can imagine, emergency room with the respiratory therapist, the physician, multiple nurses, the same kind of acute care happens in someone's bedroom, delivered by the firefighters and the paramedics. And so that time would, 15% of the time, it would be 2 minutes more. And, when the ambulance was present, your response for medical calls and definitive care would be the same as it is today. And you guys enjoy one of the better, if not the best, response times out of the whole zone. And that's due to geography, really. This is a challenging valley to cover because you have a lot of hillside homes. There isn't that grid like you see in San Francisco, which makes things, very easy to get to. So I think Dr. Robbins summed it up. It's, that was the process to get us to where we were today. And there is no discussion about moving the ambulance that's been there for 40 years. I think there was some off the cuff kind of comments that brought concern about, the ambulance should be moved. We also said, look, if we're going to move any ambulances under the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority umbrella, and that would include the one that's currently in Corte Madera or this one, we would study operationally what those impacts are and then look at the fiscal impacts, because it is kind of treated as a franchise because there are costs and revenues. And there's been mistakes in the past where ambulances were moved, or I should say borders were adjusted that have a negative financial impact that really wasn't well thought through. So the RVPA board direction has been, let's live within our 4-year tax guidance. But most importantly, let's not make any decisions operationally or fiscally that we don't study and really understand the impacts of first. And some contracts could be negotiated. Typically you don't bookend, especially in this valley, ambulances. So putting your 2 ambulances on the far ends would not be good, because then all of a sudden when you need to cover that far end when it's open, you're coming from the furthest location. So it's actually more beneficial, and I think a full study would show this, that 2 more centrally located units is more advantageous, and then put your paramedics on engine companies in the more distant side so that ALS clock is stopped. And I'm pretty sure if we did a full study that's what would show up.
Chief Weber, I understood from the meeting, though, that we had before, a couple weeks back, that you also said in order to keep the paramedics in Ross, that we would also have to have a study. So it wasn't just to move them, it was also to keep them in Ross, meaning, you could get on board with a 4-year contract, but to keep them in a long-term contract, there would need to be a study. And I'm wondering if that's true, and what would be the time frame of such a study. We don't have a meeting until December. And so even if we all got a proposed lease agreement ready for that, what would be Ross Valley paramedics' ability to embark on a study and conduct a study so that Ross residents would know that, well, and do you think it's likely the outcome of that study, if it showed it's in a good location, that we would be able to get a long-term lease? And I don't mean a few years, I mean more like 30, which is what I think residents at least expect.
So, and I didn't answer Julie McMillan's question all the way, which was the lease part. So, I think that this is something that can be brought back certainly to the RVPA board about extending the lease. And I think that would trigger some studying, because again, that's a long-term financial commitment. And if we do anything operationally or long-term financially, we have to make sure, I have to make sure that board has the information to make those decisions. We would have to go out for an RFP to a contractor that does this type of work, Citygate. There's others that are out there that would respond to the RFP, and that the earliest that can be brought for consideration to the board is December. And then, to receive any responses back, then award an agreement, and then probably 90 plus days, maybe 120 for the execution of the study to get that data. And then that could come back in front of the RVPA board with that information.
Like in a year from December, is that a reasonable estimate?
I mean, it could be completed probably, the spring of 24.
I mean, I'm asking this because we've got an important decision. We already entered into an agreement to rebuild a paramedic station, and that makes no sense to spend almost $2 million on a paramedic station that's not going to be here, or is going to be here for 4 years. So that's likely the timeframe, though, for the paramedic to reasonably have a study that could determine whether a long-term lease could be committed to.
The other thing, the issue that comes up, though, is, for the town, the goal is having emergency medical people in town. And if there needs to be a study before we can determine that the paramedic ambulance can stay, then maybe the town needs to work with the Ross Valley Fire Department to see about pushing back the closure of our fire station, because that's the only other way we will have emergency medical workers in town. We can't be wondering about a lease, and it might not turn out the way, it might not turn out to leave medical responders here, and also closing a fire station, we could be left with nothing. So I feel like the town needs to be careful of its medical workers and not give up what we have until we're sure that we have something else. And we did that several years, when we made the decision to close the station, but that was solely because we understood that it was up to the town of Ross to determine whether and if and when the paramedics would leave. We were basically told, yes, they were here indefinitely. So we were working with that assumption. I don't know that people want to give up the fire station paramedics or EMTs, paramedics, unless we're sure that we have a long-term lease that lets us know that we have paramedics with the ambulance. So the timing's a little awkward, and I'm wondering if we need to consider pushing back the closure of the fire station if we don't have the paramedic guarantee contract soon. I would love that, frankly.
Didn't you just say that the study would be like in the first quarter of 2024, so the results would be known?
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely, if we brought something to the board in December, that Ross's interest in a longer term lease, and we've had discussions at the board in, date is that, I can't even see, September of 21 is when we brought the Ross lease to the RVPA board, and very specifically said in there, the town is interested in pursuing this. They're interested in the option of increasing the rent, really was what it was based on, under the terms of the same agreement, and that was approved by the board. So the board isn't unaware of this, and I believe now you have a council member on the board. We could bring this in December and ask for an expeditious process, and that could be part of the RFP.
And would one of the factors that in the study be how much it would cost for the paramedic station to be relocated to somewhere else?
We could certainly look into that. I mean, if you're talking about putting it at another fire station, you'd have to run some capital numbers. Depending on the level of detail, that could take a little more time. I think we could ask for a phased approach and say, come back to us with the response analysis, and then that could trigger phase 2, which might have a little bit more information. They could run parallel. And there's different ways we can handle it to get the information we need.
There have been some comments about the value of having a paramedic ambulance stationed with a fire engine for camaraderie, training, a chief. Is that likely to play a role in whether the paramedics stay in Ross if we don't have a fire engine?
So I can give you my experience, and as I started as a young firefighter paramedic here at the town of Ross, the Ross Fire Department was there, but we were a separate entity, and so Marin County's held the contract since the early 1980s, and their supervision is out of Woodacre. There are obviously captains and engineers here with Ross Valley Fire, but it has not been an issue for the county, and it's not an issue for me.
If we were to consider delaying the closure of the fire station here, what would be entailed in terms of the other members of the Ross Valley Fire Department?
So that would be an amendment to the third amendment of the JPA, and it states in the JPA that any amendment or additional JPA that's created is going to need to be agreed upon by all member agencies. So it is not a fire board decision. It will have to go back to the towns, and the town councils will have to discuss it and unanimously support it.
And on that point, Chief Mahoney, I remember at one of the board meetings, you indicated that you were surprised that Ross made the decision to close the station and didn't think it was a great decision, which is actually a point that also Citygate made. in its recommendation. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think in general, nobody wants to close a fire station. I think closing a fire station is what nobody wants to see. But what was proposed to us is that there was an inability to provide a facility here that would house firefighters. And if that's the case, and that was decided upon by the council, then that was the decision that was made.
And Chief Weber, one of the things you said was your perspective on not needing to have paramedics with fire, but my understanding is that it has been raised that it's desirable to have the paramedics with the supervision and chain of command that would exist. Is that fair, that that's been raised as a consideration?
I think there was another chief in the valley that brought that up. Again, my experience has been, we've been here for 40 years. I didn't do too bad coming out of there. From a supervision perspective, we get things done, and the nature of our organization is that often you're operating with an engineer and a firefighter, and so it has not been a problem. That Dan may have a different opinion on that, but my perspective, and I think our experience, has shown that this has been a successful operation.
Okay. Thank you. Does any other member of the council have any questions? Okay. Why don't we bring it up to members of the public? Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? And if you do, maybe if you could line up if you wanted to be heard. Okay, seeing none, can we take a look on Zoom and see if anybody wishes to be heard?
There are no raised hands at this time.
Thank you. So bring it back to the council. Obviously we felt like it was important with the Brown Act. We can't just share the information that we learn with you informally. So obviously we wanted to have a conversation with the council about this, and certainly let the community understand the issues, since we're kind of at a point where we're moving forward on different fronts, and the potential to not have an opportunity to go back is here. So if anybody wants to be heard.
I don't think we're at the point where we need to make a decision about reconsidering whether to close the fire station or not. I feel like 3 years has gone by. We've done a $150,000 facility study, scoping out what our plan is. We've established a lot of goodwill with all the other members of the Ross Valley Fire Department to allow them to accommodate us in closing our fire station. I think I'm pretty confident that the lease negotiation and the study will indicate that the town of Ross, with a new $2 million paramedic facility, will be the right place to continue the 40-year reign that the paramedics have been here. And I don't think we should be overreacting right now based on the path that we're taking. We're not at a point where we're hiring an architect to scope out the facilities. I think we should give this some time. I think the risk of saying, oh, let's revisit the closure of the fire station. First of all, we don't have the funding to build a new fire station. And when we originally scoped out the cost of the fire station, it was what, $13.8 million? And that was at the height of the pandemic, when interest rates were like 2%. So the cost has probably almost doubled. So that's a huge issue. Second, I worry that the Ross Valley Fire Department board members and/or the jurisdictions that are represented on that board are going to say, what are you guys doing? We don't agree. And we're not going to agree that you can revisit this closure. So therefore, then where would we be? Would we have an independent fire station? And that would cost an inordinate amount of money, because not only would we have to rebuild the completely dilapidated fire station that we have, and we've had our firefighters in portable since 2005, which is really a travesty. But we would also have to operate a separate fire station. And the cost to do that would be, I mean, one of the reasons why we joined the Ross Valley Fire Department was because we wanted to save money on a fire chief, and we wanted to have synergies. And so I'm very concerned that that kind of a reconsideration is not going to be met in a positive way, and we're going to be in a worse situation. I think we need to wait and be prudent and go slowly and let these negotiations play out, and then come back in the spring once we have more information, more data, and then make a decision at that point in time. I think it's really premature right now. That's my discussion.
Well, I would just comment that, yes, it's true that 3 years ago, it appeared that the funding wasn't there, but I don't think that residents understood the possible consequences of closing the fire station. And I think that if, knowing that we didn't have a long-term contract with the paramedics, knowing that closing the fire station could mean no emergency medical responders would be in town, I think that the funding would be there. It is the highest priority of residents. And I think that should be our starting point. Our goal is to maintain emergency medical responders in town, whether they are firefighters on a fire engine or paramedics. I do think that the simplest approach would be if we could have a long-term lease with the paramedic authority. That's what we had expected. We actually had expected that the paramedics would be here in perpetuity. If we can have a lease that essentially guarantees close to that, I think that's a win-win for everybody. But I do think that because the goal here is to keep emergency medical workers in town, if the paramedic authority lease doesn't work out, then we do want to have some medical responders in town. And the next thing would be to look into not closing the fire station, which I agree is a complicated negotiation. It would be best if we don't do it. But the goal, again, is we want to keep emergency medical workers in town. Step one is working with the paramedics, but we don't want to lose any other options.
Yes.
I agree thoroughly with what Julie said. I don't think, my prediction, not based on as much as I would like to have, but my prediction is that a study is going to show that it is appropriate to keep the paramedics in Ross if we build a facility for them, and that we will end up going ahead with as we thought we would for the long term. I also really don't like the idea of revisiting things. We're a legislative body. We make rules, we make decisions, and that's it. We've got to move on to the next thing. I don't think that anything has happened to indicate that we need to make a different decision, and we should just keep going along as Julie has suggested.
I've just comment that the Citygate study that was done in 2019 clearly contemplated that Medic 18 would remain here in Ross with or without a fire station, and that they indicated this was the appropriate location for Medic 18. And so I would hope that any additional study would not come to a different conclusion, but would agree with the original Citygate conclusion. I'm not aware of anything that would have changed materially in the meantime. But we don't really need to make any final decisions today. We've stated our concerns, and hopefully any additional study that would be done in any negotiations about a longer lease term to provide us with the assurances we're seeking before we commit to spending all this money on a new facility. That it would all come, as Beach said, that it would come out in a way that was a win-win for everyone. And if not, then we would face that issue then.
Well, I agree that the simplest decision would be for the paramedics to remain in Ross, and I just feel like, it's really shocking though. And Beach, I'm not in agreement with you on the idea of not revisiting something. I mean, here we know and have been told that there is a 4-year lease and they're not willing to enter into a longer lease. And with that uncertainty, we can't go forward and rebuild our facilities at a nearly $2 million price tag. It really does impact the member agencies. It's not just Ross that should be concerned about the lack of medical coverage in Ross. It should be all the member agencies of Ross Valley Fire Department. And I think they will be, because everybody relied on the Citygate study, which absolutely concluded, as an assumption that Ross would have paramedics. So if we don't have paramedics, we've got a really different situation than the community considered or the council considered when we voted to close it. And if that can't come to fruition with the paramedics remaining in Ross, then I think we really do need to revisit it. And if we don't, I fear for their ability to pass that parcel tax, because for a community to not have a fire station, not have paramedics, and not meet what we understand is one of the primary needs and concerns of our community. And instead, I mean, I've never driven from Corte Madera to Ross with a red flashing light in my car, but I'm thinking that's longer than 3 minutes. So I think that's a real concern. And, I'm glad we had the discussion, and I think it's fair that we not just have it with our community and our council, but that the public at large knows that we have this as a concern. So if there's nothing further, then why don't we move on to the next item, which is item 13.
Thank you.
Town Council to provide direction regarding the recommendation from the Ross Valley Fire Board's Labor Management Subcommittee to fund a third person on one of the Ross Valley Fire Department's engine companies effective July 1, 2024, with the resulting $147,705 increase in Ross's required member contribution for fiscal year 25, which equates to a 5.9 increase. And Town Manager Johnson, you have that report.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Chief Weber and Interim Chief Mahoney for spending their evening here in Ross. And it's just going to take a few moments, and Chief Mahoney is going to be giving a brief presentation, and he has a nice PowerPoint.
Could I make a comment?
Sure.
Can I make a comment?
About the agenda item?
No, about Chief Weber.
Oh, sure.
At the State Firefighters Conference in Riverside a couple weeks ago, Chief Jason Weber was named the Fire Chief of the Year for the entire state of California. So congratulations. And if you haven't seen today's IJ, there is just a glowing editorial about Chief Weber. So congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
I guess I
Okay.
have to go next. Well, good evening, Council. I have a brief slide presentation that I would like to present that gives an overview of the town manager's staff report and the staff report that was presented to the Labor Management Subcommittee and the Fire Board. It is the recommendation that the Town Council provide direction regarding the recommendation from the Ross Valley Fire Board Labor Management Subcommittee to fund a third person on one of the Ross Valley Fire Department engine companies effective July 1, 2024, with a resulting $147,705 increase in Ross's required member contribution in fiscal year ending 2025, equating to a 5.9% increase. Can I move this? It's covering my screen.
Oh, I see.
Oh, thank you. Okay, the current engine company staffing for Ross Valley Fire Department relies on a two-person engine company. Roles typically fall on a firefighter, instead fall on a captain and an engineer. The Ross Valley Fire Department is the only fire department in Marin County that still has a two-person engine company. I wanted to provide a little bit of background. It's been a long-term goal of the Fire Board to transition to a three-person engine company. As part of the 2022 JPA's Third Amendment, starting July 1st, 2025, 2 of the 3 fire engines will be staffed with 3 personnel, leaving 1 fire engine still with 2. In January 2022, the Fire Board approved a staffing deployment side letter. One of the letter's intentions was to how to increase staffing through the Labor Management Subcommittee. In September 2023, at a Fire Board meeting, staff recommended the subcommittee meet and discuss options to increase staffing. Director Robbins was appointed to fill Ross's vacancy on the Labor Management Subcommittee due to Director Cool's departure. The Labor Management Subcommittee met in October 2023. A staff report, attachment 3 to your staff report, was presented to Labor Management Subcommittee outlining the need for additional staffing. The committee agreed unanimously to bring forth a recommendation to the Fire Board. On October 11th, the recommendation was brought forth to the Fire Board. However, staff and the board suggested bringing the recommendation back to each town council. The next steps are, if Ross Town Council supports the Labor Management Subcommittee's recommendation, an item will be brought forth at the November 27th Fire Board meeting for approval. If approved, a recruitment will start with an expected start date of July 1, 2024. In Fairfax, San Anselmo, and Sleepy Hollow now have the authority by their councils to vote yes on this recommendation. The following provides a brief overview of the staff report presented to the Labor Management Subcommittee and the Fire Board. The recommendation is as followed. It was option number 1 was chosen and states each member agency will begin paying their respective percentage share for the position start date, and the recommended start date was July 1, 2024. You'll notice that the staff report that was presented to the Labor Management Subcommittee followed the industry standard known as the National Fire Protection Association 1710. NFPA 1710 is a nationally recognized standard for deployment of suppression operation. It calls out a minimum of 4 firefighters on a fire engine, along with a minimum of 16 firefighters on a effective response force, otherwise known as a structure fire response. Also referenced in the staff report was a 2019 Standards of Cover assessment. The intent of the study was to provide a foundation for the future in fire service planning. It was called out a number of times in the study. Recommendation 3, they considered a 3rd firefighter for the department. An opinion was that they were concerned about the overall limited department staffing, and 1 additional firefighter per this request will then bring the effective response force up to the minimum standard, which is 16. The staff report was able to quantify the differences between a 2- and 3-person engine company through the National Institute of Standards and Technology Studies, also known as NIST. There was a fireground study that consists of 60 laboratory and fireground experiments, and a separate EMS study consisting of 102 field ground experiments. The study was also done by the U.S. Department of Commerce. Some of the specific impacts or the pros for a 3-person engine company that the NIST fireground study called out was hose line deployment. A 3-person engine company can deploy a hose line 57 seconds faster versus a 2-person engine company. And a hose line deployment is really referenced as how fast can you get the hose from the fire engine to the front door to start applying water to mitigate the hazard. They also discussed search and rescue operations and how a 3-person engine company can start a search and rescue operation 25% faster than a 2-person engine company. A search and rescue operation is a common operation that an engine company is assigned for at each fire. What they ultimately do is enter the building and search the building for any possible victims. An effective response force, which I mentioned before, is the response force that responds to an initial structure fire. Adding this recommendation of one firefighter per an engine will increase the response force from 15 to 16, which is the NFPA 1710 recommended standard. So all of these factors equate to an increased survivability rate for our fire victims. EMS impacts. A 3-person engine company can access a patient 30 seconds faster versus a 2-person engine company. These impacts were called out in the NIST EMS study. I put in here that our engine companies currently with a 2-person engine company carry 94.6 pounds of gear into a medical aid. So a 3-person engine company is going to be able to distribute that weight and allow faster access. It also talks about victim removal. This references getting the victim from the house into the ambulance, and a 3-person engine company can remove a patient for transport up to 1.5 minutes faster versus a 2-person engine company. And the last is CPR. Our current 2-person engine companies cannot perform basic CPR functions. 3-person engine companies are able to perform the 3 basic functions of CPR: ventilation, compressions, and defibrillation. As of now, our engine companies need to request a second engine to even do basic CPR functions. So 3-person engine companies will increase the survivability rate for any EMS patient. And last but not least, physiological effects. Reports of firefighter fatalities consistently documented overexertion and overstrain and are a leading cause of line of duty deaths. In the EMS NIST studies, it was recognized that smaller crews, particularly 2-person engine companies, have higher heart rates, and their heart rates are also sustained for extended periods of time. A 3-person engine company will decrease heart rates, reducing the chances of line of duty deaths for our firefighters here at Ross Valley Fire Department. Ross fiscal impacts directly related to Ross. The chart below represents the fiscal impacts. They represent the cost for 3 additional firefighter paramedics. These costs include salaries, benefits, one-time protective clothing costs that were factored into the first 2 years of the chart, sick and vacancy leave costs that would entail coverage for whoever is sick or on vacation, and negotiated salary increases of 3% per the MOU. So these costs, we really tried to be as transparent as possible with all costs. And I would like to recognize Chief Grafser for really crunching these numbers and getting us to a close, I feel like, pretty accurate cost. Conclusion: the department needs to make a paradigm shift to maintain effective response force in the modern day world. As mentioned before, we're the only department that has a 2-person engine company. Supporting the subcommittee recommendation will move the department closer to obtaining its goal of a 3-person engine company. End of report.
Thank you very much for that. That's a great report. Does anybody have any questions of the chief? Okay, let's open it up to members of the public. If there's anybody that wishes to be heard, if you would please line up at the podium. There's a time limit, and I think our clerk puts that up somewhere, and it'll beep when you're done, or when she says you're done.
Can you hear me? Good?
Yes.
Where's this time limit? Oh, I'm right here? It's like a CrossFit clock. You guys are getting me all nervous. All right. Members of the council, I'm Mayor Breckus. My name is Sid Jamont. I'm the president of the Ross Valley Firefighters Association and co-chair of the Labor Management Subcommittee. You have a passionate and dedicated group of firefighters serving the town of Ross, some of whom are here tonight. We are dedicated to the craft of this profession. We prioritize constant growth and evolution of our training, education, and mindset so that we can perform above and beyond for the citizens of Ross and the surrounding communities with every call for service. We work diligently on what we can control, but as firefighters, we cannot control the fact that we operate below the minimum staffing levels set forth by the National Fire Protection Association and the county standard. The national standard is 4, the county standard is 3. As the last department in Marin staffed with only 2 firefighters, we've been operating at this level for far too long, and this council has the control to make a positive change to the service that our citizens will receive and deserve. The author Lori Buchanan said, "What you are not changing, you are choosing." If this council, and ultimately the fire board, does not change our staffing levels, you are choosing a substandard service for the citizens of Ross. You are choosing to continue a staffing model that is 1/2 of the national standard and 1 firefighter below the county standard. 2 people per engine is not safe for firefighters who dedicate their lives to each other and the communities they serve. And it is not safe for the citizens who expect more out of their firefighters than ever before. And 2-person staffing is a choice. The Ross Valley firefighters support the Labor Management Subcommittee's recommendation to fund a 3rd person on one of our engines. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, it is my pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Steve Berto. I am on the town council in San Anselmo, currently serving as the mayor. I also serve on the Ross Valley Fire Department Board of Directors. And just here for a couple of nights, I first want to say I absolutely love your town hall. I always have. It's a awesome old rustic building. And, you know, have just a tremendous amount of respect for all of you. I spent last night with Mayor Breckus and Councilmember Robbins at our fire board meeting. I served for a few years with Councilmember Kuhl on the fire board and had the distinct pleasure of serving with Councilmember McMillan on the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, which she is now the chair, and she is the chair of the finest wildfire prevention authority in the state of California. So you said it, I didn't. I just wanted to come here to provide an update of what we did in San Anselmo. We brought this for a discussion. We didn't take a formal vote, but we had a discussion and did a straw poll, and it was unanimous. I know the town of Fairfax was unanimous in their support of this, as was the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection Board. And certainly urge you to make the decision to go in this direction tonight. The importance, I read the staff report. I've seen how the discussions have gone both at our board and the various councils. I think, you know, some of the considerations being made are with regards to the potential joint venture between Central Marin Police Authority, Fire Department and Ross Valley Fire Department. For me, that has nothing to do with it. This is about weight of response. And as Chief Mahoney demonstrated, it's the difference between minutes and seconds that can save lives. And that's why having the minimum standard of coverage is really an important thing to do. Also, it has, if we don't move to the minimum standard of coverage, it certainly compromises our mutual aid situation, and that's a really important thing. So I strongly urge you to take this position, not for any other reason than it is absolutely the right thing to do, and to give our firefighters, the women and men who provide these services, keep our community safe, the support they need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, members of the council and Mayor Breckus. My name is Tommy Pistolka, and I am Vice President of the Ross Valley Firefighters Association. I am an engineer and paramedic, as well as an acting captain, currently assigned to Fire Station 19. I share my rank with you because I believe it is one that affords me a unique and well-rounded perspective of engine company operations. As an engineer paramedic qualified to work as an acting captain, I can and have filled every seat and its corresponding responsibilities on the fire engine. During my first shift as an acting captain, I responded first due to a vegetation fire in the hills of Fairfax. Thanks to many months of training, I was prepared for this moment, but throughout the incident, I couldn't help but think to myself, man, it sure would be helpful if we had a third person to assist us, instead of splitting the difference and carrying extra hose and equipment between myself and my engineer, both of whom were heavily task saturated during the first 10 minutes of the incident. Luckily, however, every resource responding in behind us had appropriate staffing levels, and as firefighters do, we adapt, we overcome, and the incident was mitigated. As we cleared the scene that night around 4 a.m. and returned to quarters, my engineer and I reflected on our experience. As we discussed our actions and decisions, what had gone well and where we thought we could have improved, I asked him, how are there still only 2 of us on the engine? After having answers for everything else that occurred that night, he couldn't give me an answer. Members of the Rosstown Council, as you move to vote tonight, I ask you the same question. How are we the only professional fire department in Marin County with 2 people on the fire engines? As you ponder that question, I ask that you please consider the perspective of your Ross Valley firefighters, each town in this JPA, and each and every town we respond to as a mutual aid resource. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members. I'm Jake Peterson, and not only did I grow up in Ross near Councilmember Breckus over there on Drake and Winship, I also started my fire career in Ross in 1992, so a long time ago. In the early 2000s, I became a fire captain, and I'm currently an acting battalion chief for the Ross Valley Fire Department. Over the last 30 years of my career, I've had the opportunity to work on a 2-person engine company and a 3-person engine company, and to say the least, the difference is night and day. It's really a needed component to make the difference on the fires that we go to, like Tommy explained, but also on the everyday calls that we go on every single day. We need that one extra person. It's very, very important. So voting tonight will not only make it our engines staffed appropriately, but it was going to increase our firefighter safety, and it's also going to help all our community members. So I didn't use my 3 minutes, but that's all I needed. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that wants to be heard?
Good evening. My name's Ken Martin. I'm a retired firefighter out of the city of San Rafael and was their training captain for many years. You've heard a lot of talk about the response times and what that means. But often when we're firefighters, we talk in a firefighter language and it's not understood by the public. So to help you understand what you heard from these professionals today, and having been the person who had to provide the training for the 3-person and then also the 2-person response when we did company drills, to understand the difference of that 2-person engine company, when you respond to a structure fire, you need to do what we call make a hydrant. You need to hook hose up to the fire hydrant before you pull the fire engine up to the house or the structure that's on fire. With the 2-person engine company, that's the responsibility of the captain, because the engineer is driving the fire engine and he still has to get it to the structure. So when that engine pulls up to the structure, and you as the resident who's upset that you have somebody inside or that there's an emergency inside your house, you have nobody to talk to, because the captain is 200 to 300 yards behind you making a hydrant. Makes that hydrant. The engineer can't talk to you because he has to take care of taking the hose off the fire engine and hooking it up so there's a water supply. It's very, very important with a 2-person engine company, because should that engine break down during the operation, the water from that hydrant is the only supply they have, because there's nobody left at the engine to take care of it as they start to facilitate the firefight. So the captain has now ran multiple feet, a couple hundred yards up to the house. He's now going to talk to you, but going to be out of breath, going to hear very little of what you have to say, and then come back, talk to the engineer, plan to make their attack, and then go in to save your property. I heard you talk during your paramedic talk today about the importance of minutes. You've lost 2 minutes already. There's a very, very good instruction video that can show you what happens from when a flame starts in a couch with a 1-minute clock running, and you see the entire room explode into flames in 55 seconds. You've lost your loved one because that captain was worried about making that hydrant because they couldn't rest their life going into your house because they don't have somebody back there operating that fire engine. So you've put your family in danger, we put the firefighters in danger, and we're not able to accomplish what we need to for $144,000. That's what's at risk today. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you take a look if there's anybody on Zoom?
There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, I'll close it. Close it to public comment, bring it back to the council. Does any member of the council have a comment?
I mean, it's obvious that, you know, the Ross Valley Fire Department needs to go to 3 people. That's the county standard. So I don't think there's really much to discuss.
Anybody else?
I agree. I think this is a no-brainer. And I think for residents who are going to be considering our parcel tax, were we not to do this, they would be kind of scratching their head thinking, why wouldn't we do this? So I think it also helps us with the ability to pass our parcel tax and makes everyone in the Ross Valley safer. So I'm all for it.
Beach, did you have something you wanted to say?
I can't imagine that we needed all this presentation to convince us that spending this relatively small amount of our budget is an appropriate thing to do to improve the livelihood of our firefighters.
I think this is a necessary and appropriate thing to do as well. And but I did appreciate the presentations. I thought they were very well done. Thank you for coming here tonight.
And I too agree that this is the right decision and the appropriate one to make. And I'm very happy to see Ross Valley Fire Department achieve this goal. So that's great. So I think that this is simply a recommendation. I think we have it. So we will move on to the next item, but I want to say thank you very much for the presentation. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 14. That's 205 Lagunitas Road, Lagunitas Country Club. This is for the paddleball court design review permit, use permit amendment for nighttime lighting, and use and adoption of the resolution 2344.
As a member of the Lagunitas Club, I think it's not appropriate for me to act on this matter, so I'll withdraw.
Okay, so we have one recusal on the matter.
Good evening, Mayor Breckus and council members. This is 205 Lagunitas Road, which is the country club. And tonight they are requesting a design review approval to add an additional platform paddle ball court and nighttime lighting use until 8:30 p.m. Here's a site plan that shows where the fourth paddleball court would be added. The additional court would be 60-foot long by 30-foot wide and will have a 12-foot high fence with steel tubing and hexagonal wire mesh. There would be 6 20-foot high pole-mounted downward directed LED lights. And design review is required for this approval for the addition of the fourth court. And a use permit amendment is also required to allow the nighttime lighting. A little bit of background, in March of 2023, the ADR group reviewed the proposed project, providing support with a condition that the retaining walls match the existing, and the applicants have agreed to that. Then in August of this year, the town council reviewed the use permit amendment, providing conditional approval to allow the fourth platform paddle court, and included that the Lagunitas Country Club facilities would be solely used by its members and not available to the public. So tonight, staff's recommendation is that the town council adopt resolution number 2344, approving a design review permit to add a fourth platform paddle tennis court, and a use permit amendment for nighttime lighting and use, subject to the conditions in the resolution. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have for staff.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have a question? Okay. Seeing none, why don't we open up? Does the applicant have a presentation they wanted to make? You don't have to. I'm just asking. Thank you. So I can also bring it up to members of the public to see if there's any public comment. Is there anybody from the public? Anybody online?
No hands raised.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. Is there a need for discussion, or is there a motion?
I move we approve resolution 2344.
Second.
Councilmember McMillan? Councilmember Robbins?
Aye.
Mayor Breckus?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kircher?
Aye.
All right, with a vote of 4, the motion passes.
Okay, great. We'll move on to item 15, which is 2 Crest Road Design Review Hillside Lot Permit, Nonconformity Permit, and a variance and adoption of Resolution 2329.
Mayor, excuse me, we probably need to wait for Councilmember Cool.
That's fair.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight, the applicant at 2 Crest is requesting approval of design review, a hillside lot permit, and variance. First, I'd like to address 2 corrections regarding the project. First, there was a typo in the project description in the plans where it incorrectly mentioned a bathroom. The correct description should be a storage shed. Secondly, there was also a typo in the staff report. The correct building coverage should be 15%, not 10%. On the staff report for the building coverage? No, it should be 15% for the, not 10% for the standard. Yes, correct. So now onto the project description. The project proposes new landscape structures to include a new pool, spa, pool equipment, and storage shed, a deck, an outdoor barbecue, concrete retaining walls, new fencing and gates over 48 inches in height, a deck structure with metal screen over 6 feet in height, a vegetable garden, new site plantings. No trees will be removed for the project, and no new planting is proposed on Baywood Avenue. The existing parking on private property along Baywood Avenue will be removed. The site continues to meet the parking requirement through the existing 2-car garage and driveway, allowing for a total of 5 spaces. A variance is requested to permit the construction of new landscape structures, including the pool and spa within the front and side yard setback, the barbecue area within the front yard setback, and a new deck and metal screen over 6 feet in height. At the time of writing the staff report, comments have been received from the neighbors at 70 Baywood Avenue and 1 Crest. The neighbor at 70 Baywood is concerned that the location of the pool is in the setback and also in the location where the property owners at 2 Crest currently park cars. The neighbor at 70 Baywood is concerned the owners of 2 Crest plan is to claim the additional ownership of the right-of-way by adding planting along Baywood Avenue. Staff has updated the conditions of approval to indicate that no additional landscape be permitted within the private road. The neighbor at 1 Crest raised the issue of working with the town to upkeep the private road. Since the road is a private road, the town is not involved in the maintenance of the private road. Staff recommends that the town council approves resolution number 2329, approving design review, a hillside lot permit, and a variance for the property located at 2 Crest, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question of staff?
I do. Alex, is the applicant required to repair any road damage on the private road caused by construction? Condition T. You want me to answer?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll take this one, Councilmember McMillan. So I learned yesterday that this portion of Baywood and Crest are actually private roads. So in that case, it's not within Public Works to grant any encroachment permits, and that's really the responsibility of the private property owners who currently maintain those roads.
But there is a condition T in the proposed staff report that indicates that, like all other projects in our neighborhood and on private roads, the property owner is responsible to bring the private road up to the condition that it was prior to the start of the construction based on a video recording. And I just wanted to point out that that condition is in the conditions as part of the approval to address that neighbor at 1 Crest's concerns. Not really a question.
Happy to respond to that. That is in fact true. We do have the regulatory power to require them to repair the private road if they damage the private road during construction. And that's our standard condition we apply to both public and private roads. What we don't have the authority to do is require them to make improvements or ensure that they're not going to damage the public roads because it's not a public road there. And that's the condition that we amended tonight that Alex addressed in the staff report.
Any other question of staff? Okay, why don't we see is there a presentation from the applicant?
Hi, good evening, Council and Mayor. My name is Brad Eichste, Imprints Landscape Architecture.
I'm sorry, just so you know, we normally give you 15 minutes. You don't have to take it all, but you also have the right to, hold some back if you wanted to do any kind of rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent support from the staff on this project. We've been working on it for quite a while. We did go to ADR in January. We received some really good feedback from them, and we incorporated some adjustments to the plan, brought it back in July with the adjustments and received unanimous support, and have made a few more adjustments to the plans with support of the staff. And I think that there's a lot of information in the ADR minutes, and I'm mostly here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have questions of the applicant? Okay. Why don't we open up for public comment and see if there's any public comment on this item? And if you would, please state your name and the clerk will put on a.
Mayor,
timer.
I'm Allison Pickard. My husband and I own 70 Baywood, which is right across the road from where the proposed project is drawn. Our primary issue is really just the relocation of the 2 to 3 cars that are regularly parked in the parking spaces that are being removed. In losing those spaces, they're pushing their, they're using their true boundary as their fence line. But we're worried that they're going to be using the space parallel to that fence as their primary parking for those 2 to 3 cars, which would then make the egress in and out of our required parking, our garage at 70 Baywood, difficult. It's pretty constrained already up at Baywood. And it really pains us to have to comment on anything. We do wish that we would have been able to work with the residents of 2 Crest to kind of come up with a solution or a compromise that would work for everybody, with the parking up on the hill, which seems to be the largest issue. I had suggested earlier that perhaps there was a different location for the pool. Granting a variance for a pool outside of the setback, which then would affect parking on the hill, which is already so constrained, seems, I can't really understand why that would be granted, especially because of the parking constraints at the top of the hill. So I thought long and hard about this. We would love to see the residents at 2 Crest have a pool. We'd love for them to be able to use their property like in whatever way they want to. But because the parking at the hill and the specific constraint of the roadway between the 2 houses has been an issue that we've had to deal with during the time in which they have owned the property, we just find it really hard to be supportive of the way that it actually is now. A compromise that we thought might work is there's a planter bed that's currently in the right-of-way adjacent to their property boundary that causes the greatest point of constraint between our 2 properties. And we thought that if they were going to continue their property line and have 6-foot fencing for screening anyway, would they really need the screening that they have planted in the right-of-way on Baywood Avenue? Perhaps they could remove the planter bed, and that therefore would create proper clearance and passage for cars and parking up on the hill, and that would alleviate some stress on the neighborhood. So that's basically our primary concern, is encroachment into the right-of-way. Thank you so much.
Following up on that, is in front of, that area that's like a bump out where they have their parking, once they take their fence up to that point, to the true property line, is that area in front of that area going to be a no parking zone?
I believe since it is a private road, that would be up to the owner of 2 Crest.
So Alex actually went out there to measure, and based on rough measurements, there's only 24 feet. So in order to actually park there, you would need 28 feet, is my understanding, right, Rich? So depending on where that fence line lands and the road, there may not be space to park there. So you wouldn't be able to park there. There would be no parallel parking there.
Because the town does put no parking signs on private roads. So we already are, even though there are private roads where we have no parking signs on it. So there's nothing from a regulatory standpoint that we don't do that, correct?
Maybe our Public Works Director can answer that. I'm not aware of us signing private roads with parking restrictions.
I believe there are no parking up on Upper Road West and on the other road there off of Upper Road. So there's a few locations where parking signs have gone up, and the municipal code allows the police chief to place those signs. It's an old ordinance, but we gave the power to the police chief. I don't think it was Chief Pata. This is several years ago that these signs were placed, but yes, the code allows the police chief to put up those signs.
Okay, thank you.
As a neighbor there, we put up a lot of signs when we did our repaving. The neighbors decided where to put the no parking signs, and we put them in. And many trucks have crashed into them since.
You had a question?
Yeah, along the same lines, do we have authority to control parking places on private streets?
So the control of parking, that does fall to the police department, and the police department definitely has jurisdiction on public and private roads all throughout Ross.
And if I may, we probably should stop the questions right now and go back to public comment, finish public comment, and then bring it back for further questions.
Okay, let's go finish public comment. Is there anybody else that wishes to be heard? Is there anybody on Zoom?
There are no raised hands.
Okay, close it to public comment.
Applicant want to do a rebuttal?
Does the applicant have any rebuttal they want to do?
This just came up recently about the parking, but we don't have any plans to park, or the client has no plans to park in that area of the street. That was never part of really any discussion that we've had. And when we started this project, one of my main concerns was that parking that's there now, was that required by the development? Was that was that part of the conditions of approval of the other house? And it was not. It was just, I think it was just by default that maybe when the house was built that the contractors parked there, and then they just turned it into parking. So on the original submittal for the new home there, the parking requirements were all made by the garage. And so there's 2 spots in the garage and 3 outside the garage. And that would have killed the project, which we researched before we even started the whole process of this. So the parking requirements were met, and I think we'd be fine putting up no parking signs or painting a curb red or something like that too. So anyway.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question or comment? Does anyone want to open it up for discussion?
I'd like to move to adopt resolution number 2329, approving design review, hillside lot permit, and variance for 2 Crest Road.
Second.
Oh,
Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
Councilmember Robbins?
aye.
Mayor Breckus?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
With a vote of 5, the motion passes.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 16. Council correspondence first. Has anybody received any correspondence? No. Okay. Has anybody, any future council items? Okay, I like it. The last item is item 17, open time for public expression. So let's see if there's anybody that wishes to be heard. Is there anybody on Zoom?
There are no raised hands on Zoom.
Okay, we're going to move it on to the last item, which is adjournment. We're adjourned.
Thank you. Good job.